Yes.
Take care, buddy. All right, Charmaine, why don't you tell us about this awesome book you're reading?
Okay, and I've been listening on audiobook. We went into the office the week before last, and then we're starting to go in again tomorrow. We go 2 days a week, but I find getting books to listen to from the library it's really good time for me to just kind of feed my mind while I'm driving. But it's called Everybody Fights, so why not get good at it? And so I don't know if you've seen Amazing Race, Steve. Brendan and I were just talking about that. But the couple who won the last time around, the one that just ended, they are the ones who wrote the book. So, and they're famous on, or they're well known on YouTube. They did some video about Christmas jammies a number of years ago and got to be well known. And so now they just produce kind of funny videos, but they're hilarious, you know, but they're kind of a mixed match couple in a lot of senses. You know, she's someone who'd rather stay home. He's somebody that would rather go out, you know, introvert, extrovert, which I think happens a lot in marriages and stuff, but just some of the challenges they've gone through, you know, trying to communicate. He's also got ADHD. She suffers from anxiety and depression. And so there was a lot of factors that kind of go into their relationship and can make it challenging. And so each chapter, they take a different fight that they went through and kind of some of the skills that they learned along the way to try and help address some of the, you know, the issues that had come up in their marriage. And, you know, they give full credit to this pastor at their church that they've been meeting with for a number of years. That's kind of helped them with some of the skills that they've, you know, that they were presenting in the book and different ways that they approached it. But I've just been kind of meditating, I think, on some of the ideas that they come across. Like they've got magic words that they put in the book that a lot of times, if you can kind of keep those solidified in your head, that can help when you're in the middle of an argument, just knowing, you know, if you can start to hear those, kind of like we talk about in here, like if we've got kind of these things that we think that kind of snap us out of moments, that was kind of some of the idea that they have. And so like one of the first chapters, they were talking about staying in the airport, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but whenever you get into an argument, it becomes something much bigger than just that one topic. A lot of times it starts as something simple, and then it becomes about not just that one issue, whatever it is, but everything that ever went wrong in the entire relationship ever starts to get folded into it. And so that's kind of the idea about staying in the airport. And you really need to kind of take one issue and see it through. You can't just run to the rental car desk and try to get out of there and hightail it out of there as fast as you can, or jump on a different plane. You know, you really need to stay in the airport if you're, you know, wanting to see things through to get at the destination you really want to arrive at. And so I certainly, and they go through their arguments and kind of dissect them, and they talk about not just what the argument was point by point, but then they also show what they were internalizing at that point. So a lot of times that's really where we go wrong, because once things start to get emotional, you start to take on, you know, all of this past history that you have that the other person isn't necessarily aware of or cognizant of. But one of the last things that I was, you know, hearing about in there is they were talking about, and this is something I struggle with, how, you know, one issue doesn't make up an entire person. And I know for me, if somebody makes a mistake, it's real easy for me not to make that person, you know, about that one incident. You know, one incident isn't what it's all about. But I have a hard time with other people or expecting other people to do that with me. I think when something goes wrong, it can just derail an entire relationship. I don't trust them to give me the same generosity or the same grace. And I've realized a lot of that goes back to who I was married to. And, you know, finding a way to trust people in those moments. And, you know, sometimes people think that you really need to have it all internally, where you aren't looking for validation or aren't, you know, seeking that. But sometimes when you've been through experiences like this, I think it can be hard. And sometimes that little bit of reassurance is what you need to kind of start retraining your brain to see it differently. And it was an interesting concept for me, because I realized with other people I'm generous, but I hadn't realized how much it tied back to my marriage, why I, you know, it's almost reinforcing perfectionism. And you're not perfect. And if you're bringing that idea that you're perfect, it's kind of insulting to your partner anyway, because they know you're not, you know, and they, you know, one of the things they were talking about is kind of having a sense of humor about it. And when you make a mistake, these tiny little things, crazy things that we all do, like, oh, I accidentally, you know, microwave something and it blew up in the microwave. I mean, if you can share like some of those crazy things that happen to you, just the little flaws that we have, as you start doing that and find humor in some of those things, it gives you permission to be imperfect, and it helps you, you know, bring up those things whenever things are a little bit more serious. And, you know, you can feel safe that, you know, it's not going to blow up the relationship just because you're not perfect. So me having natural perfectionistic tendencies anyway, being married to somebody that, you know, was kind of harsh in the sense that, you know, he would try to define what my actions meant, and that wasn't necessarily true. It was his perception, but he wouldn't get off of those points. And so in that sense, he was holding me to a standard that wasn't even, you know, who I was being, but it kind of set up that whole idea of perfection as well, perfection as he wanted it. And, you know, I didn't realize how ingrained that had kind of become. And so one of the things I had sent, you know, the quote to my friend that was in the book, and, you know, we had talked about it, and I had just gotten off the phone and I went back to send him another text message, and I saw it sitting there. And I realized kind of from our past, it's like when something's wrong, I need somebody to just say in the conversation, we're okay, you know, and then you can kind of continue and have the conversation, but it helps me to be reassured that a relationship isn't falling apart over an incident. And so I thought that was kind of, you know, an interesting piece that I got, at least from this book most recently. Feel like I've been talking a lot.
You know what, I wouldn't say you talked a lot. I would say you shared a lot. That was all very beneficial. And so, and I think it's a great starting point for our discussion tonight. And I made note of a bunch of different topics for us to dive into, because I think right now this is all about harmonizing with conflict, right? And that ultimately we can understand conflict better, including the causes and potential solutions. And we can have a very specific process to shift from conflict to harmony. And it's a skill you can learn just like anything else, as the title of this book you mentioned suggests. And there can be a step-by-step system on how to get crystal clarity on all this stuff. And a lot of it is really a conflict on the inside is what's behind all of these outer conflicts. It's a conflict of values, principles, attitudes, you know, that need to be identified at some point, you know, to understand where this discrepancy is. Now, here's something interesting. Everybody has a conflict rule, okay? Everybody has a conflict rule. And if you don't know what your rule is, it means you're being ruled by it. For example, to some people, conflict is a disagreement in which I could disappoint people. That's their conflict rule. But can you see how that might lead to certain behaviors, perhaps avoidant behaviors that don't help matters, right? Some people, their conflict rule is that it's warfare, and it's a chance to show your power and strength and stand up to people, which, you know, many times when people have that rule, they don't actually stand up for themselves. They just escalate the intensity of the conflict as a matter of pride, perhaps. So everybody has a conflict rule. Do you want to know how to figure out what yours is?
Sure.
Go fight someone.
Here's what you do. I'm going to say a sentence and you just fill in the blank with whatever bubbles up from your subconscious brain. Okay? Whatever bubbles up from your subconscious brain. Okay? Here's what it is. We're going to let your brain tell you, and it's probably going to sound stupid, whatever it is. Most people it does, and that's why we have issues here. Okay? Maybe it won't, but just know that we're expecting something stupid and just like, oh, I can't believe I actually said that. Okay? Conflict is what? Fill in the blank. What does your brain say? Conflict is what?
In my case, it's a chance for me to share my point of view and let someone else get to know me better, or why I'm reacting the way I react.
Perfect. Yep. Steve, any thoughts?
I think, one thing I just thought is it's inevitable at some point, right? That doesn't mean that every interaction, but we're all different. We all have different experiences, different value systems and all of that. So at some point, we're going to have, maybe it's trying to decide how to roll out a new program, or who a leader, of a group should be, or who to include, or where to go on vacation, or what to have for dinner. There's, we're bound to have conflicts. You just can't get through life avoiding that. If you do, then you're never getting what you want out of life. You're just letting people step on you, by trying to do that. And I think it's not to say that you're going head to head, but there's always going to be a difference of opinion in something, right? And so that's just a way to find an opportunity to, resolve it in, the best way possible for the parties that are involved, and not something that is like, I don't want to. I'll give you an example. I dodged a bullet on this one. This was awesome. So I was working at a company, and I was one of the nighttime managers. There were two of us. I went on my vacation, and my best friend Mike at the time had to deal with some complaints of the hygiene of a certain person on the team.
Yes.
And so it had to be dealt with while I was gone. So Mike drew the short straw. And so he had to pull this person aside and start having this conversation and whatever. And he's talking to this guy, and the guy's like, "No, man, I shower, I use deodorant. Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And Mike has this thought: "Are you taking your shoes off under your desk?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "All right." So he figured out what the problem was. Then he could work to a compromise, with this guy, whatever. Very uncomfortable, right? Who wants to go tell another human being, dude, you stink real bad and you got to do something about it because you're killing the rest of us? Like that's a conflict, and it's uncomfortable because you're not meaning to go out and cause this person harm or embarrassment, right? But in a workplace situation, it had to be dealt with. And so I think it's just understanding that that's part of life, right? We're always going to have differences, but that doesn't mean you can't work to a solution, or at least a working relationship within those parameters.
Okay. Excellent. So let's do this.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, of course, please.
I've always thought that most of the time you just need to talk through things and figure it out. People are generally don't understand, how you're reacting to what they're saying. I've always believed that. But one of the things that this book said that was kind of interesting to me, that kind of shifted my perspective, was conflict is really how we get to know each other for the most part. Because for the most part, we don't sit around asking each other deep questions. You don't have these conflicts when you're just sitting around watching TV. You don't really get to know the other person. So conflict actually invites an opportunity for you to get to know another person and how they think better. So even though I kind of had that thought that, once I explain to them how I'm reacting, they'll understand better and we can understand each other better, I never looked at it quite as positively as they were kind of bringing it up in that moment. And so I thought that was kind of a neat way to look at it. It's a way to actually learn or understand each other better, and learn who the other person is better.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for mentioning that. And please jump in with all of those shares, because they're all, Charmaine, super good. You are on fire tonight.
Well, so, and I think, to Charmaine's point too, right, is like conflict takes courage, right? Because sometimes you just need to be the one that starts a difficult conversation. But, a lot of times I think the other party, depending on how you approach it, can be open to resolving or trying to work through, a problem. There of course are just people looking for a fight, confrontational types out there, but that's not most of us. Most of us are misunderstood or hurt or feel marginalized or something like that. So we take on a defensive posture, but most people are not, malicious or, out there looking for something. And so if you have the courage, even if it's like, hey, man, I don't know how to bring this up, so I'm just going to say it. And I hope you'll like hear me out so I can get to the point where you're understanding what I'm trying to, portray to you. Then if that person's open to it, you'll see it. And if not, then, then that's just opportunity to keep chipping away at those layers, like Charmaine was saying, to get, to that. But, I think a lot of times people try to avoid conflict because they don't feel skilled in having difficult conversations or bringing up sensitive or deep conversations, and they don't know how to do it, so they just avoid it at all costs.
That's perfect.
I just added in the chat, mature people ask for what they want. That was one of the other sayings they had in the book that they had been taught. You can't just avoid saying it, then you're not being honest in the situation. But if you keep telling yourself, if I'm a mature person, I have to ask for what I want, people don't know it unless I put it out there. And so, even walking up to, if you've had this conversation with somebody, you can say, okay, mature people ask for what they want. I have to bring this forward. And you just kind of know that's where that's coming from. And, you can ask for what you want. You may not get it, but you can have the conversation, right?
I'll give you a real quick one on that. So when we got out to New Jersey, my buddy said, hey, we've got a couple of different options. For dinner, we can go get sushi. There's a really good hamburger place, or we can go do something else. And I'm kind of like, sushi's not my thing, like I can choke some of it down, but it's not really my thing. I love other seafood and all that, but my wife's like, I don't know, I could go, a hamburger or Mexican. And I said, you know what? Hamburger sounds great to me. I said, I'm really just, sushi's not doing it for me. And so we went to this Burger Barn place, and I got kind of their signature Jersey City hamburger. And it was fantastic. I mean, it was exactly what I expected reading the description on the menu. And if I had just kind of punked out and we went to sushi, I would have been like, oh crap. All right, well, now let's go get a protein bar or a protein drink or something somewhere, because I was just like, yeah, I'll go, but I really wasn't feeling it. And neither was my wife. But she kind of started saying, well, I could go for the other two. And I was like, hamburger, let's go do that. And we did, and it was right on point. It was awesome. So, sometimes, two things. Mexican always sounds good to me, but a burger sounds good. And sometimes I'm truly could go either way and don't care. But, sushi, just after flying all day Thursday, didn't sound good, and I would have been just kind of like, why did I just like punk out and not say something, if we had gone that route, because I just wouldn't have been satisfied, like I was with a really good burger. So
excellent.
But I'm not mature. Let's just be clear on that. Okay. I mean, I had a moment of maturity, but lest you be deceived.
So
it was, we need to come up with something different for you.
It was a flash of brilliance.
I'm gonna do two things next. I'm gonna take you guys through two things next with our conversation. One is scoring your conflict rule and coming up with a new rule of what conflict means to you, a rule that's more empowering and encouraging. And I can tell Charmaine is in the process of making this shift, especially with reading this book. So we're gonna help get some clarity on what a better way to look at it is. And then we're gonna go into the three types of people when it comes to conflict. Steve has described a couple of those types and has already been aware of it. So we're going to just unpack those and share some thoughts and observations and solutions for those types. Most people are conflict avoidant, right? There are the conflict seekers and the conflict harmonizers. So we'll break that down and have a discussion about that as well, and everything else.
There's one more thing I remembered. I just want to share real quick before we dive into that.
Yeah.
This goes back, I don't know if you guys ever did theater sports, but this is what it makes me think of. Well, actually, they kind of alluded to it. So whenever you're doing some sort of improv, if, someone says something like, I'm a police officer and I pulled you over and did you know you were speeding? The next person can't just say something like, well, hey there, cowboy, what's your horse doing here? You know what I mean? You have to kind of go along with what someone's introduced.
Yes.
And so they were talking about when there's a conflict, the need to validate the other person in what they're saying. Even if you don't agree with it, you need to kind of validate it before you add to it instead of necessarily negate it. So you could be like, yes, and, so it could be like, the person pulls you over for speeding. And then you're like, well, yes, I was speeding, but aren't you impressed my horse can go that fast? So you're accepting what they've said, but then you also can kind of help shift it. And so that whole idea of yes, and anytime you're responding to someone, finding a way to agree and then to kind of shift it is a much better way to approach it without people feeling like, they're being like it's a conflict, I guess is a better way to put it. But I liked that mental idea of just finding the agreement before you move things forward.
You know what? That was I'm glad you shared that. I did Second City improv. And that was basically the rule we operated by. It's yes, and. And because you're accepting all the offers when they make an offer on where to take the scene, you just go yes, and then you find that harmony.
Yeah.
Right. That makes a beautiful scene. So it's kind of like, how can we find that conflict harmony through the process of yes, and? Absolutely. And we want to be able to see it as an opportunity to do that, because a lot of people think of conflict as this big scary monster in life and they want to avoid it. Or a lot of people just get drunk on it. Like they love it. They love the drama. They create the drama and everything else. So we want to be able to find a harmony with this reality of life. So here's 5 questions. So you take your conflict rule. It should be one sentence. So it's like, what is that one sentence you've written out? Okay. And just throw it into the chat. Just write your one sentence into the chat. If you had to like sum it up right now, what's your brain telling you? How do you realistically look at conflict right now? Don't say what you think it should be. Just say what your brain tells you when you're just on autopilot. Okay. And then we're going to score it. And then we're going to see if we can, if it's not a perfect 5 out of 5, we're going to see if we can craft it into a 5 out of 5. Okay. So examples might be, conflict is warfare. You have to stand up to people and prove yourself. That might be an example of a conflict rule. Or a conflict is terrible. You'll let people down, avoid it at all costs. That might be a conflict rule, right? So we just want to kind of figure out, what is your conflict rule? And then I'll take us through these questions. Okay, so, and because a lot of times conflict sucks, right? Like the whole theme of conflict in our life, it's not the happiest theme. However, if a movie did not have conflict, would it really be interesting? No. And if life didn't have conflict, might it be just as boring as a movie like that never had any conflict overcome? It really does bring a lot of the excitement of life. So we want to be able to view it as such. Okay. So here's question number 1. You're going to give yourself a point or no point. Does this statement give a sense of security? Yes or no? Because it could provoke fear and anxiety, your statement, and that works against conflict resolution. As Steve mentioned, it takes courage to start difficult conversations. So if our conflict rule does not bring a sense of security, then it might shut us down. And as Charmaine said, it helps if you say we're okay and our relationship isn't falling apart because of this incident. That's necessary to move forward. It helps if our rule brings a sense of security. So that's question number 1. Does this bring a sense of security? Number 2. So right now you either have 1 point or no point. Okay. Number 2, does this statement lead to forward progress? Does it inspire forward progress? Otherwise, it might lead to paralysis, right? Our rule might shut us down. It might distract us. It might lead to delay and avoidance. So, does it lead to forward progress? So right now, you should have a score out of 2 points. Number 3, does this statement give us a sense of control? A sense of control over our circumstances instead of leading us to helplessness or feeling like we're stuck in quicksand, right? Because it'll dampen our enthusiasm, and we won't answer the call to adventure with all of the hidden gifts of conflict if we don't feel like we have a sense of control in the matter. We won't acquire those treasures of wisdom and understanding to rise above our conflicts if we're shutting ourselves down. So number 3 is, does this statement give a sense of control? All right, so you should have your score out of a total of 3 right now. Number 4, does this statement give hope instead of creating hopelessness? Okay, does it give hope instead of creating hopelessness? Because with hopelessness, we shut down again, right? And with hopelessness, we numb ourselves and we numb our reality, and we turn to things like drinking and drugs because reality is just too painful to deal with, and it's hopeless anyway because everything is messed up, right? Number 5, does this statement help you be the person you want to be? Think of it like software programming. You've programmed yourself with this conflict coding, right? Does it program you to be the person you want to be? Because it might lead to some self-loathing. It might lead us to not accepting ourselves because we're not acting in ways that we truly value. And a lot of times people who are self-loathing actually enjoy conflict. They're drawn to that energy. They become conflict seekers. The self-loathing become conflict seekers. We want to make sure we don't have a rule that's turning us into that. Okay. So at this point, you want to just score your conflict rule out of 5. If it's a 5 out of 5, we keep it. Okay. If it's a 5 out of 5, we keep it. And if it's not a 5 out of 5, we craft it into something empowering. We want something that's going to satisfy all 5, and we want to keep that in our brain moving forward in this human pilgrimage and journey we're all on, because this is an inevitable part of life. Okay. So, any thoughts at this point before we go into potential like 5 out of 5 conflict rules? Charmaine, any thoughts?
Well, on one hand, you can only control your side of the conflict. But on the other hand, I think you have to also consider the other person. Like, I think mine, what I was saying before, comes across as very selfish. I mean, I think by sharing my perspective, they will get it and that will bring them to the table, but I'm not as focused on who they were in that moment. And I should also be considering that. Okay.
You know what? That is good. So we're going to want to have that be part of an awareness that you're anchored in moving forward. And if we have a 5 out of 5 conflict rule, then it should be. Okay. So I would say this, just a way that we might want to look at conflict, just to kind of like craft your rule into something else. And I think your rule was an opportunity for me to share my perspective. Okay, good. So I might say this. Might it be helpful if we said that conflict is an opportunity to discover what we stand for, discover the reality other people are living in, and the skills to best get along? Right? If we said conflict is an opportunity to discover what we stand for, the reality of other people are living in, and the skills to best get along, does that give a sense of security?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it lead to forward progress? Yes, because it's growth focused rather than being fixed. Does it give a sense of control? Yes, we get to discover the unlearned lessons. Does it give hope? Yeah, it means that there's a solution is inherent to this problem, right? And do you think it'll help you be the person you want to be? Somebody who can have that maturity to understand and be able to harmonize with the reality of other people. Yeah, so that would be a 5 out of 5 rule that we could upgrade to, that would satisfy what had previously held you back, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you like that one?
There's a lot I like about it, but I think to help center me better because of what I'm seeing I'm struggling with, I think I need to be more focused on the idea that I'm learning about them too. It's not just discovering, what I stand for. It's, getting to know them better as well and making that part of the journey.
Perfect. So we would just maybe craft
Yeah.
in a little piece about that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And keeping those original themes. And that's how we'd make a 5 out of 5, right? Steve, any thoughts on conflict rule?
I like these questions. I had never seen these, kind of laid out like this as a way to try to, evaluate what you're looking at, because, sometimes it can be, just a really hey, college roommate, stop, drinking my orange juice or my Rockstar or whatever, right? It's kind of a minor thing and hopefully you work it out. And sometimes, especially like within our families or really close associations where, potentially there, it seems like there's a lot on the line, right? There's, relationship. I have adult kids that, like, okay, stop making a mess, like quit leaving your shit around my house, right? Stop, whatever. And sometimes it's harder with families, or if you have really strong personalities of, people butting heads, within families or things like that. And there's a lot of stuff. That's why I put in there like time consuming and, emotionally draining in some situations, because there's a lot of stuff going on, right? But I think it's evaluating, these questions are good to kind of help evaluate how I look at that. And Charmaine already kind of talked about it, but, making sure that I may think that my point of view is accurate, but it's very possible and probably probable that there's an angle that I have not, considered, that is outside my experience or, that kind of thing. So these are, good to help me kind of see what I'm dealing with so that I am, trying to be more, accurately assessed, and so that I can move forward with that properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in some cases, when I get, if someone was to say, conflict can be time consuming and emotionally draining, right? Then I might come up with a conflict rule that puts a healthy spin on that. I might say conflict is an opportunity to set healthy boundaries and train other people how to treat me. Right? Because now we're doing something that, gives us a sense of security. It's progressive. There's control. There's hope. And it helps us be the person we want to be. Right? But we're just framing it in an empowering way, because we're taking back the control by framing it in this way. So I might use something like that as a good counter rule and kind of get that locked in my brain.
Yeah, and I could maybe even add to that too is, trying to overcome conflict is worth the time and the emotional investment.
Oh yeah.
That's where I went
if I care about the other person, it's time well spent, and it's emotionally rewarding, to engage in that discussion with them. I'm just thinking of, we read a book called oh crap, man, I totally forgot about it, but I read it last year, and I'll have to think of the title on it. It was a conflict resolution book, but it was about having fierce conversations. That's
Okay.
it. It's called Fierce Conversations, and it's basically kind of the, hey, crap's not working. You got to, maybe you got to write someone up at work. Maybe things not working out in your intimate relationship, whatever, and kind of digging into the deep, thick weeds and all that.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what was sticking out in my mind, is that in the last couple of years, I've had a few, conflicts that you don't resolve in 2 minutes of just, hey, dude, that was my Rockstar. I was going to drink it while I studied tonight. I need you to go buy me a new one or whatever. Oh, great. Hug it out. We're all good. It's crap of, I got to plan this out. I got to be ready. I've got to be in the right frame of mind. I've got to be, caring toward this person, not, angered or any of that. And, sometimes those take work, and they're, so that's kind of where that was coming from for me. But, other times it's just like Charmaine says, it was just asking what you want, hey, could you please not take my rock star? I paid for that, and I really like, Rockstar Lemonade, and, it makes me think you don't value our friendship if you just go take my crap without asking. If you ask, I'll gladly give you, you know what I mean? So, but I think it's definitely, you can't also approach the idea of conflict with seeking mutually beneficial resolution without care for the other person, right?
Yes.
You can't do it, right? Yeah, you can't. I mean, I've had to fire people. I've had to fire friends in the past, and it sucks, but they deserved it. And, they were uncomfortable conversations and that kind of thing, but I cared about the person. So I didn't go in there and go, you stupid a-hole, blah, blah, blah. It was more like, dude, this is where we are. I really wish we weren't having this conversation, but this is why we are. And, and I really cared about the person, and it steered the conversation to at least be a conversation, and for us to go back and forth where, I still valued that person's friendship and that relationship. I wasn't out to lop their head off. I wasn't out to embarrass them, hurt their feelings. And my intent was paramount in how that went.
I think that's
but
something,
because I had that regard for that person.
and I think that's something Brendan says to us a lot when we meet here, how he always thinks we have 10 out of 10 potential. And I think sometimes, especially in those moments, someone can have let you down and disappointed you, and you can let them know, I know you're better than this. And so even though you're having this hard conversation, it kind of like what I was saying before, it's like I'm generous with other people like that, but I'm always thinking other people aren't generous with me. You need to let them know this event isn't the end of everything. Right. It hasn't, totally diminished who you are as a person. You still have, the potential to do great things, but in this moment, this is where we're at. You still have all the, opportunities, to do things going forward. It's not the end of the road, but, in this event, you lost your job or whatever the case may be, but you can say, I know you're better than this. And, unfortunately, here's where we are.
Yeah. Well,
Beautiful.
when we did the Tony Robbins breakthrough challenge back in January.
Yeah.
And, he brought up the 3 C's, how women typically treat men, and then the 3 U's of how men, typically treat women, kind of thing. And, conflict or criticizing, right? The criticism. And in my parents' relationship, my dad gets so pissed off if he feels like my mom's nagging him, because he saw that be a key component in his parents' marriage falling apart, of the constant nagging, of, my grandmother held her dad in this high regard, walk on water, do no wrong, expected that of my grandpa, which you can't live up to. And, they divorced. So my dad, it bugs the living hell out of him. And, to me, too, like, my wife's good. She doesn't nag me that much anymore because I probably yelled at her enough to stop. But we had the conversation maybe 5-6 months ago, and I said, okay, I'm asking you and I'm giving you permission to speak to me like this, saying, I am reminding you, you wanted me, this is your reminder to do this. So instead of, why didn't you fold the laundry? Why didn't you fold the laundry? Hey, this is me reminding you, as you asked, to do the laundry. And so the wording that I gave her was, okay, as soon as I hear her say it like that, that is me asking her to ask me, not her just, coming at me. And, And we probably need to go back and revisit that. But when we did that, that put us both in the right place, because I gave her permission to do it. And by the wording I asked her to use, put it squarely on my shoulders. And she was willing to do that. And then it just cut out a lot of, the conflict over stuff, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've had a lot of shit go on in our life in the last year and a half.
I've seen.
But it was really good too, I think, to, like Charmaine says, mature people ask for what they want, right? And so, instead of, hey, maybe you talking to me like that, could you say this, or could you, whatever. We were told when we first got married 26 years ago, don't go to bed angry. Steve goes to bed angry. If Steve is forced to talk about crap when he is lit up and pissed off, I will say crap that I shouldn't say. I will say things that I don't mean just because I keep getting pushed. And if I just go to bed and wake up the next day, then I'm calm. We can talk it out. And I haven't got to that point for, several years. But in the beginning, that sounds like good advice, right? Work your conflicts out, blah, blah, blah. No, not at all. Not when you're two, strong-willed people that, are trying to figure out their crap. And, like my wife grew up on a pig farm. She was in school. She lived on her own for quite a while. And, we got married, and it was very much like all this new crap that we're trying to mesh, and it's not meshing. And one day, this was years and years ago, I said, look, I only want to do one thing today. I want to watch college football all day. That's all I want to do. I will fold all of the laundry that you bring to me if you just let me watch football. And my wife hates folding laundry. She brought me 9 loads of laundry, and I folded it all. And it was the greatest Saturday ever. And we both got what we wanted. And she would rather mow the lawn. I spent 2 hours mowing my lawn Saturday afternoon. It pissed me off. It was seriously like, it was so tall because of all the rain here. But, we've kind of figured out, I'd rather fold the laundry. She'd rather mow the lawn. And so we just go do the other thing, or make, hey, you do this, I'll do that, done. But that took a long time to figure that out and to get that conflict. But to Charmaine's point, we got to figure it out and be okay, right? Because we're not tapping out over the laundry, right? That's stupid. So, but to figure out that style, I think, is really important. And again, to have that person's best interest, when you're approaching it, and not to approach it out of anger or, high emotionally charged states, of letting it come back down and then addressing it with love and compassion.
So I love it.
Secret contract is another magic words that they use. So whenever you have situations like that, you can say that, and then like, okay, we need to renegotiate this. You have this, contract no one ever talked about.
Right.
What's it? Secret contract?
Secret contracts. Where you have in your head, this is my role, this is so-and-so's role, this is who they are, that kind of thing. When you realize you've kind of fallen into that trap and you're feeling resentful because, you're doing your role and they're not living up to their end of the bargain, but they don't even know what the deal is. You just go to the other person and say, okay, secret contract. And then you have to talk about what the contract was.
I'm competing against you in my head, and I'm winning.
Exactly.
You don't even know it, but I'm winning.
There's a really funny thing in the book, if you guys go listen to it, where they're arguing about the empty toilet paper holder.
That's funny. That's
It's
funny. I think secret contracts are really unspoken rules of life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you just violated my rule. I don't even know what my rule is. I live by it. It's subconscious, but I know you violated it. You should have read my mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to, at a high level, just kind of like sum up what Steve said there, because I think there is a process, and I think he shared a lot of good wisdom in that. Number one, and we'll probably talk about this in our next conversation that I jump on with. We'll do like a conflict harmonizing part 2, because there's so much we can go through on this subject that could be really helpful. And I think both of you are sharing such profound wisdom bombs. Like, this is really good, like lots of great stuff. So Steve said, care for them first. You can't do it without caring for them. Calm yourself first. Care for them first, calm yourself first. You can't do it when you're all worked up and everything else. And then he basically says, like, leading in with, are you willing to figure out the things we each have to do to be okay? Right? And then he kind of goes into like, and then she obviously says yes. And then he says, I'm asking you and I'm giving you permission to say, this is your reminder to do this instead of nagging me, because it puts us both in the right place. That's what we have to do to be okay. And she's like, all right, perfect. Right. And then, another thing is, you could say, like, look, instead of talking to me this way or handling it like that, would you consider doing it this way instead? Right. So I think just that little process is intentional. I actually think it's very loving to do that, to be intentional with how we handle conflict, because conflict is a point of great leverage in life. Things can go one of a variety of ways based on how those life moments are handled, right? Now, mind you, even if you do everything right, somebody might diverge out of your life because they are conflict seeking or conflict avoidant or whatever it is anyway, but we can always do our best. And I think for Steve's conflict rule, in order to be a 5 out of 5, let's help Steve come up with a better rule, because he's better than this conflict rule. He said conflict can be time consuming and emotionally draining. Okay. So that's good.
Aren't necessarily, but
yeah,
the close ones, either with, family, coworkers, close friends, can be. So yeah. Continue.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make it like every conflict, like you left the toilet seat up, is this, big thing, right? But they can, and sometimes, they're worth it, but it is an investment, to do that. And so
I'm gonna try to interpret your rule for you. Okay, I'm gonna take a jab at it. You tell me thumbs up, thumbs down. If I do a terrible job, you let me know. Okay, I'm asking you to tell me if I do a terrible job. Here's my interpretation of your 5 out of 5 conflict rule. Conflict is worth the time and effort because the process helps us figure out the things we each have to do to be okay.
I like it.
Okay, it's your words basically, man. I'm just putting it together for you.
Yeah, no, and I think so, because even the small things, they can become big things if they're not dealt with. And a lot of times, we don't, I've heard the phrase, there's 1,000 people chopping at the branches of evil for every one person chopping at the root, right? And a lot of times we deal with the superficial crap, because it either can be painful or uncomfortable to get into what's really going on, and to have that maturity to say, I need you to stop treating me this way, or I need this from you, or I don't know, what. Yeah, I'm trying to be there for you, but it's not working, or whatever, right? That, we have to have those. We have to get through those, or else we got to go, live in the woods by ourselves, because, there's always going to be something with somebody. So, but I think it is worth doing. It's a worthy endeavor, to keep the small things at bay so they don't become big things, and just get to the root cause of it, and to be open when that point of view gets shown to me, to go, wow, I absolutely did not see that, and try to understand and be understood versus being right all the time.
Well, and one of the things you said there too is a lot of times there's these seemingly little things, and we don't understand the big things that are underneath all of that. So one of the other things that they had mentioned in there is like the 3 whys. And so, you can ask, you can take something really small and, you ask, well, why is this an issue? And then they give the response, well, why is that? Well, why is that? And you keep taking it down a layer. And sometimes that helps you discover what's at the root of it, because a lot of times we don't know. We just know this thing is really irritating me and we're not really sure why. And even with this book, as I was, going through and listening to it, and I shared it with a friend of mine and we kind of talked about it for about an hour. And then, whenever I went back to send another message and I just saw the line there, I went another layer deeper. I saw something more in it. And it's just kind of a process of uncovering ourselves even. So you're having this conflict with someone and you can't even adequately represent yourself all the time either, unless they're helping you unpack that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Just digging multiple layers deep until you get to the root. And I would submit to you that usually the root is some sort of fear of not being good enough. Or some sort of fear that if this happens, I won't be loved. If this happens, I won't be good enough. Because one of the things that definitely gets in the way with conflict is ego. Deep down, it's pride, right? So a lot of times people would choose pride over principle. And they choose pride over people. And they're protecting that. But in the end, they want pride because they want people in their life. And so it's kind of perverse in a way, right? People want pride so that they're being loved and they're accepted and everything else, but they actually, ironically, it doesn't work out that way. Often it works against us. It turns us into a villain rather than the beloved hero. So it's a classic, timeless failure method. I tell people, remind ourselves, here's something to anchor ourselves in. When the ego gets involved, I make terrible decisions. When the ego, think how many terrible decisions were fueled by egotism in conflict. Okay, horrible things that were said and done, and when the ego gets involved, we make terrible decisions.
Take that,
Sorry, what was that?
I said, take that, Putin.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think one of the things we'll do is in a future conversation, because I think this is a really good one. Charmaine, you're really on a great, you are totally in your zone right now with everything you shared tonight. You were just a complete all-star. And I think let's revisit this subject. I know it's important to you right now, and Steve had some great insights, and I think it's relevant to us all. And so I think in future, what we'll do is we'll get into the 3 different types of personalities related to conflict. We'll get into the preliminary attitudes for resolving conflict. Steve touched on them. We'll get into the attitudes that cause conflict because we want to be able to recognize them, especially in ourselves. Okay, the roadblocks, and then the specific step-by-step process to really harmoniously get to a resolution and make amends. Because and I can integrate a lot of the stuff that comes from a lot of great sources on how we can do this, because it helps to have a step-by-step system that you could just follow when resolving conflict that helps you navigate that territory. Because if you miss 1 or 2 pieces here or there, people can get triggered and reactive. And then they just dig their heels in, right? So it's kind of like you just have to, it's like baking a very fine pastry or something. You just got to get the recipe right, or it's just going to get burnt, right? Or we get burnt, if you don't get all the little precise things going on in the proper way. But yeah, so we can get into some of that stuff in future if you guys want to prepare for that in a couple of weeks or so.
Sure.
And then and we could unpack it a little bit further. Tonight was all about conflict rule. I think too is one of the big key takeaways. It's like, all right, well, everybody has a unspoken contract about conflict, okay, and what it means. And that often gets reflected in some of our disharmonious behaviors. So we need to make sure that we have a good rule we're operating by when it comes to conflict, right? So we need to make sure it gives us a sense of security, forward progress, a sense of control. It gives us hope, and it helps us be the person we want to be, right? Not somebody who turns a mere trifle into a major incident and creates drama and stuff, right? So, good rules are conflict is an opportunity to discover what we stand for, learn more about the reality other people are living in and what matters to them, and hone the skills to best get along. That's a great conflict rule. Conflict's an opportunity to set healthy boundaries and train other people how to treat us. Conflict is worth the time and effort because the process helps us figure out the things we each have to do to be okay. Or we could even say conflict is an opportunity to turn disharmony into a spirit of cooperation. Conflict is a learning opportunity to discover our higher reality by becoming wiser and more loving. Like, as long as in our life story, as long as we can put a more encouraging sheen on this idea of conflict, then we can be our best selves moving forward and doing it in a wise and loving way, rather than throwing caution to the wind and just being triggered and reactive and making things worse, because there's a part of us that wants to get bothered by stuff. It's a part of the psyche, and it's been damaged by our fears and insecurities. And once it gets bothered by one thing and that gets resolved, it creates a new battle of the day. Okay. Watch how this part of the psyche can ruin your life. Okay. And that's what, when you learn your conflicts in your life, give you the opportunity to go to battle with that part of yourself, the part of you that creates conflict, because it's always from the inside out. Right. So we need to just be able to hone those battle skills, being a warrior in the human experience. So why don't we go into some key takeaways? Steve, why don't you start? What are some of your key takeaways from tonight?
Oh, I think, just a reminder to not react emotionally, to engage in, discussion when I'm calm, when I have, good feelings towards that other person. I'm ready in a position to understand them and, try to, work it through and be open to hearing their, their point of view, to see what I'm missing. I think one thing that I was just thinking that we hadn't really talked about is just remembering to be open. And when someone approaches me to resolve a conflict, that I am, open to that I recognize the, courage it took for them to approach me, and that instead of becoming defensive or that kind of thing, that I engage with that person to understand each other and, figure something out, because it could very well be that there are things I think are minor that are major to other people that they want to try to work out with me. So being open to that, but I think just making sure that it's coming from a place of love and caring, and that I don't do it when I'm emotionally charged, and do it when I'm, holding that person in, a good place to try to get on the same page and understand with them.
Wow, that was so good, man. Everything about what you just said there was like powerful. Super, super good. Don't react emotionally. Wait till you're calm and you have good feelings towards them. You're open to understand their point of view and see what you're missing. Recognize and honor their courage to even bring things up and approach you with it. And just be aware that the things we think are minor in the reality of another person might be a big deal.
Right.
That's a great attitude to take forward. I think between that and your new conflict rule, I think you just crushed it out there today. That's it.
Hashtag winning.
And just remember, I mean, I can't help but think, like, your wife grew up on a pig farm, so she definitely learned a different version of conflict, right?
Yeah.
But it also, and no wonder she doesn't like to put up with mess anymore. So we all have our own background and experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's the kind of, thing too, that, like, we have friends that are very like 1950s traditional, male female roles, and it works for them. It doesn't work for me. I would gladly stay folding laundry while Delana went out and mowed the lawn, and vice versa for her. She would rather be out playing with the chickens and mowing the lawn than doing the laundry. And so, but it took us quite a long time to get to that point, right? But now it really works for us. But in the beginning it didn't, and so, but to my earlier point too, is we just don't tap out over the, which way the toilet paper is rolling, and say, well, that's it, that's a breaking point, I'm done. I couldn't possibly live with a person that thinks it goes backwards, when clearly the only right direction is to go forward, until your 2-year-old hits it and spins it all on the floor. But just one stupid little thing in closing, like my wife and I, for years and years, compromised on which toothpaste we were going to have, instead of now we just get the one we want. and we don't go through it any faster because it's one person per tube. But we're like, why did we do that? That was so dumb. Why did we think that we had to share the same toothpaste? I like baking soda toothpaste. She hates it. So I get what I want. She gets what she wants. That was so stupid. But like as newlyweds, we're just like, oh, we got to mesh everything, so it's just kind of one of those dumb little things that you go, that was so inconsequential that it just doesn't even matter.
Worth the time and effort to
right?
figure out what each has to do to be okay.
Right.
Worth the time and effort to figure out what each has to do to be okay. Think about the price of that suffering and consequences and stuff.
Well, it's so Delena's gluten intolerant. She has Hashimoto's. So gluten really messes up her joints and pain and inflammation and all that. So, we will go to places that we know have gluten options, but she also doesn't expect me to eat the way she has to. We meet in the middle and we try to go to places that, are good for her. But we had some friends in Utah and the wife's like, all right, I've got this health problem. We're all eating like that. And the husband's like, oh, hell, we are not. I'm not eating this crap that you have to. That's your problem. So, but we just kind of, we work it out. And so it, we found the greatest cornbread on planet Earth 2 weeks ago that happens to be gluten-free. So we're going to eat that for the rest of our lives until we die, because chili and cornbread is awesome. So we will, do some of those things, but, it all comes down to that, though. I think it is best to put in the effort, and to have, that concern. If I'm pissed at my wife, we're not going to resolve anything. If I'm calm and she's calm and we try to say, hey, we're going to be all good when this is over, let's get on the same page, it'll work itself out.
Perfect. I love the fact that you had an unspoken contract that when you're married, you have to use the same toothpaste. Okay.
I know, right? It was so
Isn't that ridiculous? That was a rule in life you had. And but that's another area of conflict being worth the time and effort, because conflict is worth the time and effort because it's an opportunity to get clarity and understanding on unspoken expectations that might be completely insane, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's your new, forget it, scratch the old rule we came up with. That's what conflict really is. It's clearing up that junk. I can just see it. Why are you guys here at divorce court? We just couldn't agree on the toothpaste that we both had to use. We can be, just to summarize that point, I think us human beings can just be so cute on the things that we do that we don't even know we're doing. And then all the time. So love it. Charmaine, your key takeaways.
Well, I actually latched onto something Steve said, and the whole idea that when someone approaches you with conflict, if you think about it as they cared enough to bring it to me, and so obviously they cared about the relationship enough to bring it forward. And I think that's a really good attitude to go into a conversation with. It's showing that they valued you. So I really like that idea, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I know a lot of times the people that are closest to us, those are the ones we get upset with because our emotions are involved and they matter. We're always nicer to waiters than we are to sometimes the people who we're closest to, because, there's caring there, and remembering that that's kind of at the root of it, I think is helpful.
That's a good reminder to take forward. And we'll clarify some of these key attitudes that we can move forward with in life in order to be at our best with these opportunities with conflict. And I think that's a great one for sure. Awesome. I thought you both totally crushed it out there. And hopefully this conversation brings some wisdom and insight and help to others who will watch the recording in future. That's why we're here, just to share and help benefit other people in any way we can, because we care as we figure it out in our journey. So awesome work out there today, both of you. Let's circle back on this subject. Just take some time to ponder and marinate on some of the things we discussed. I thought you both had such great, profound wisdom to bring to the table. In fact, I thought tonight, I was so impressed with both of you. I thought tonight you were both like better than I've ever seen you at just bringing like absolute gems of wisdom. I was more of a background role. I didn't even really facilitate much. I just let you two just go out and crush it. And you both did. I took notes. I'm like, you guys are saying such great stuff tonight. You absolutely crushed it. MVPs right there, both of you. All right. Let's do go team on 3. Fist bump, group hug. We're out. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go team.
Take care.
Love you guys. Have a
Have
good
a good
week.
night. Love you guys.
Mhm.